One of my biggest inspirations in business is Steve Jobs. I got a lot of the direction from my companies from Steve Jobs in his biography called Jobs. And if you have a business of any kind, you have a lot you can learn from Steve and his legacy too. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name is Chris M. Walker. I am the CEO and founder of Legiit.com, the world's only B2B growth engine that combines AI software and human freelance talent to give businesses access to everything they need to grow and scale. I'm also the owner and founder of Superstar SEO, a 7-figure SEO brand. Now, Steve Jobs is one of the most successful entrepreneurs of all time and the visionary behind Apple, a company worth over $2.5 trillion as I'm recording this. In this video, I'm going to crack open Steve Jobs' playbook to show you how he built Apple into the legendary company it is today, but more specifically, how you can take those lessons and apply them to your business. And that includes lessons that helped launch the first iPhone and some advice that might just raise a few eyebrows, and then how it's impacted my businesses personally. So what made Steve Jobs special? Now, he was special for a lot of reasons. But we can't start a Steve Jobs video without talking about design. He was the king of simplicity, innovation, and probably the reason behind a lot of our technology preferences to even today. That's because he was known for his approach to design. He really cared about even the most minute details of the product. He famously even took calligraphy lessons to get better at writing and design, for example. Interestingly and unusually, he was involved in both the hardware and software design to an extreme degree. And he wanted how the product looked to him was as important to him as how it worked. He also had a natural intuition for improvements. He could look at the way something was done and come up with a better way. It just came naturally to him. In fact, here's a quick clip that demonstrates exactly that.
We've been very lucky to have brought a few revolutionary user interfaces to the market in our time. First was the mouse. The second was the click wheel. And now we're going to bring multi-touch to the market. And each of these revolutionary user interfaces has made possible a revolutionary product. The Mac, the iPod, and now the iPhone.
This design style of finding inefficiencies, like in this case the keyboard on a phone, is what shaped Apple into the company that it is today. I mean, who knows, if it wasn't for Steve Jobs, we may still be walking around with BlackBerry-style keyboards on our phones today, rather than the touchscreens that we're all used to now. But it doesn't stop there. Steve Jobs was also a visionary leader, marketing genius, and did a lot of things that weren't necessarily by the book. And one of the first things that might change how you think about business is this. Don't be a left brain or right brain thinker, be both. A lot of people, especially in tech, focus on left brain thinking, such as critical and analytical thinking, but Steve Jobs emphasized both sides, the creative and the technical. He loved art and music, and this connection to the humanities added to the beauty of Apple's products and ultimately another way of thinking. So if you think you have to cut out all your human interests to do business, you might want to think again, because it might just be to your advantage, unlocking a level of creativity your competitors just do not have. We can also learn more than just how to think from Jobs. If you came here for more practical business advice, the next thing I'm going to talk about is for you specifically. And what I mean by specifically is an interesting lesson from the first iPhone. The original iPhone is one of the most successful and important products of the last few decades, if not the last century. However, despite all the innovation, the first iPhone was just a terrible product, ironically. Just ask any Android user, right? The OS had no copy and paste function. It couldn't send media like video or pictures in text, and it couldn't record video. There were a few other things that were standard even for other phones at the time. So why was it so successful despite it being a terrible phone? It was the only smartphone that allowed users to check email, browse the internet, and so on, which gave it a wow factor. This wow factor blew people away, and it was ultimately something they wanted so much, they tolerated all the little negativities that I just mentioned because it was worth it to them. None of that stuff mattered because of the one thing that people wanted so much in their smartphone, and which was the smartphone and the internet. They ignored all the little downsides, and that's ultimately why it was so successful despite those few drawbacks. So if you're a business owner, think about it like this. What could your wow feature be that makes people tolerate the little annoying things, even if you plan to fix them in the future? And are you waiting around for your product to be perfect, or are you launching and figuring it out later? Now, despite specializing in product design, Steve Jobs had much more than that. He had business acumen, excellent leadership qualities sometimes, and genius marketing understanding, which helped him build Apple. Now, if you're a business owner, whether you're a once-in-a-generation genius like Steve or some guy in a t-shirt like me, you're going to need some help with your business from time to time. If you do, or if you're unsure of what you need help with, head over to legiit.com/dashboard/start, put in your website and your email, and within 30 seconds, you'll have a complete analysis of your business done for you and access to all the tools and help that you need. 3 things: marketing, charisma, and presentation that Jobs excelled at, all led to Apple's historic success. Besides being a design visionary, Steve Jobs was also a great marketer because he knew what customers wanted. A simplified version of his later marketing style was basically this: build what people want and present it in a charismatic way. His style of charisma often made the way things were done up until that point look stupid, as we saw in the iPhone video example earlier. This built hype and a lot of interest in Apple's products because people couldn't wait to get their hands on the new devices. That still continues to this day, some 20 some years later, however long it is. There was much more to his marketing genius than that, though. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple after famously being ousted in, I think, the late 80s, he took a different approach to marketing than other tech companies. While most computer brands wanted to impress customers with specs and features and things like that, Steve famously ran the Think Different campaign. The ad was basically a compilation of the world changers, people like Picasso, Einstein, Muhammad Ali, Nelson Mandela, and so on, and an engaging narrator talking about the misfits and the world changers. To put it another way, he got Apple to sell dreams, not products. This led to the Think Different campaign being a massive success in terms of brand awareness. The viewers would have some sort of emotional connection to the people in the clip. It might be positive, it might be negative, but like the ad said, one thing people couldn't do was ignore it, and it built massive brand awareness for Apple. And it also played on the human desire for individuality and broke the pattern of trying to impress with features and specs and nerd shit, as I like to call it. And ultimately, it made it stand out. Now, of course, on its own, this wouldn't have as much value, but the strong end-to-end user design and ultimate quality of Apple products paired with this made it a massive world-changing success. So if you're running a business, ask yourself, how can you break the pattern of the type of marketing in your industry and stand out? Now, not all of Steve Jobs' approach was different at the time. Some of it also goes against the advice that's still thrown out there today. Particularly this next point is one that's always stuck with me, and it's something that's controversial, and that is the customer is not always right. Slightly controversial, but Steve Jobs often emphasized that the customer isn't always right, despite us having been told that time and time again in our lives. In one of his most famous quotes, he said something to the effect of, "People don't know what they want until I show it to them." So what does that even mean? Because it kind of goes against the usual business advice that the customer is always right. But like the quote from Jobs says, it's just not always true. For example, in my business, we spent a lot of time listening to customers tell us that they needed a mobile app to run their freelancing business. And we listened to that for years on end, and we finally built it, and it really didn't have any impact at all. So since then, we have learned to listen to our customers, but only take advice when it fits our vision of what we want to sell. And if someone had asked any of us 30 years ago what we wanted, I doubt that many of us would have said we want short form videos and touchscreen. But as soon as those were shown to us, that's what we wanted. At least most of us. The core message is that if you rely on customers to tell you what they want, You'll always be a bit behind the people who can analyze consumer preferences and figure it out and give it to them. Steve Jobs realized that there was a pattern in consumer preference for simplicity. So one way to likely get it right was simplifying technology. And that brings me to my next point, simplicity. The essence of Jobs' vision is that simplicity isn't just a design principle, it's a strategic advantage. Jobs believed in refining and perfecting the user experience, making technology accessible to everyone by simplifying the ease of use heavily. You take something highly technical and make it accessible to everyone. And he was pretty successful in doing so. It's the reason that we have both children and adults of every age using iPhones today. Quite often, you can figure this out by looking at a product and brainstorming questions like, what's the main drawback of this process? How can the process to the desired outcome be simplified? What are the main problems that customers have using this product? And so on. Again, looking at other industries or entirely different forms of humanities like art, music, and so on can really help inspire you with this as well. Ultimately, it's about finding a way to think different, about a bit like that famous Apple campaign that I mentioned a little bit ago. But in this approach to simplifying, there's another business lesson. One that, again, might just go against a lot of common beliefs in business. Design plus ease of use is greater than first mover advantage. People often talk about the first mover advantage like it's the holy grail of business. But Steve Jobs was the perfect example of why that just isn't true. The iPhone wasn't the first phone. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player. MP3 players existed for 3 to 4 years before the iPod, yet it beat all of them in terms of distribution and market adaptation because of its ease of use. Google is another great example of this, by the way. It wasn't the first search engine, it was just the best, which ultimately was because of its ease of use, or ease of use of what you're searching for. At least that used to be the case for them, but that's a topic for another day. So why is that? Why is this so important? What we can also learn from this is when a product simplifies a process or a market, the market size increases so heavily because now more people can use it, not just the nerds and the experts. This ultimately multiplies the market size that the people who were the first mover got become less important. This ultimately means design plus ease of use beats the first mover advantage. And that brings me to the biggest impact that Steve has had on me personally and my businesses, particularly Legiit. Steve didn't want to be just another business. He didn't even have the goal to be uber rich, though of course that happened regardless. Steve wanted to put a dent in the universe and change the world by changing the way that humans interacted with technology. A part of that vision was having Apple products at the core of everyone's everyday technology use, or what we call today the Apple ecosystem. Originally, he envisioned the Mac and then later iCloud being the core of Apple's digital hub strategy. He envisioned people using the Mac and iCloud to be the hub of each person's personal digital lifestyle. That people could use their music, videos, productivity, entertainment, all through separate devices like cell phones, camcorders, MP3 players, and so on, connect them back to the Mac or iCloud and have them all work together. People could plug their life into the Apple Digital Hub and have everything they need and communicate with one another with incredible ease of use. I adapted that vision for my main business, Legiit. Legiit started as a marketplace, but has grown into a full B2B growth engine that can power any business in a few clicks with all the information, tools, people, and support they need to start, grow, and scale their business. And we've made it our mission to get every business on earth connected to the Legiit platform as our way of putting a dent in the universe. And without Steve Jobs, that may never have happened. So I am eternally in his debt. And I hope that you took some lessons from this video and can plug them into your business as well.